Welcome back, Spookies, to another episode of Let's Talk Spooky. As always, I'm your spooky host, Shauna, and I'm excited to say that we are officially on the road. For the next 5 weeks, we're going to be traveling across the Canadian Rockies and visiting some of the most ancient and haunted locations that Western Canada has to offer. Each week, we'll be covering a hauntingly cool area and a creature. And we may include some surprises along the way, so don't forget to follow us on our Instagram and TikTok pages to get a little bit of a sneak peek on extra content. We're also going to cover haunted hotels and cryptids, and there will be no shortage of spookies. So if that's something you want to hear more of, be sure to click the follow button wherever you listen to your podcast. Not only does it support our show, but it does help us grow, and it helps other spooky people like yourself find us. If you have a spooky tale or a lore from the Rockies that you want to share, please email me or leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you guys, and you might even be featured on an upcoming episode. Tonight's episode is going to focus on 2 different walks through time. We're going to head to Alberta's badlands and wander the Hoodoos of Drumheller. From there, we're going to venture down some scenic lost roads and locate some of the most eerie ghost towns that Alberta and BC have to offer. So grab your flashlight, watch your step in the dirt, and let's talk spooky. When you stand among Alberta's Hoodoos, you're standing where ancient stone meets otherworldly energy. Most of us are familiar with Drumheller primarily for its vast volume of dinosaur bones, but the land has been home for more than millions of years before the dinosaurs walked it. And the life itself there has ancient tales attached. The Hoodoos are towering stone pillars formed over millions of years of erosion. Some of the Hoodoos reach 20 feet in height and 30 feet in width. The Hoodoos are towering sand pillars formed over millions of years of erosion, some reaching nearly 20 feet in height. But these are more than just strange geological shapes, carved from the earth. To the Blackfoot and Cree Indigenous people, they were believed to be what was remaining of petrified guardians, former giants frozen in time. One version of the oral tradition passed down among local elders describes these giants as once walking through the badlands. Some say they were similar to ancient humanoids, others say they were earth spirits. But their containment came for all the same reason. They had grown arrogant, destructive, and disrespectful of the land. And because of this, the Creator intervened, turning the giants to stone, upright and eternally in place. So their presence would always hold power, but their destructive and arrogance would remain still. There have been reports from visitors of those having rocks hurled at them as they moved through the Hoodoo formations. These small rocks seemingly will fly out of nowhere and zero trajectory point. Visitors camping have awoken to find tents littered with pebbles, even though no cliffs are visible above them. And people who have seen the Hoodoos at night describe an eerie feeling of being watched. They've had electronics fail, camera glitches, and the sound of their heartbeat echo much louder than normal. But these phenomenons aren't simply spooky stories shared over a campfire. They're deeply rooted essence that's passed down from generations of Indigenous people that have held deep roots and stillness in the land and remember stories of a time much older than we are. Reports from travelers who have camped there say, quote, "It was like the land itself was aware. My tent shook at night, and when I stepped outside, the moonlight glistened off of thousands of rocks that hadn't been there before." So as we walk through these beautiful ancient structures, it's important to remember the words passed down by Indigenous storytellers. This landscape is alive. It's layered with meaning and depth and deep knowledge that we can only dream to understand. So if you visit with respect. Remember that these experiences are everlasting. And if you have a rock thrown at you, please tell me, because I need to hear the story. And if I have a rock thrown at me, I will tell you as well. If you have a chance to visit these beautiful structures or the Badlands itself, take a moment at night if you can. Sit out among the stars and think about what it was like millions of years ago when this ancient land held more than stones and pebbles. Now let's follow the wind beyond the Badlands. Let's go deeper into the cracked hills and open valleys of Alberta and British Columbia. As we wander, we might find some towns that once thrived and then fell silent. It's time to do some ghost town hunting. Tucked into the Alberta Crow's Nest Pass lies the remnants of a town that never stood a chance. On April 29, 1903, just before 4 a.m., residents were abruptly awoken to the horrific sound of rumbling as Turtle Mountain let go of its grip on nearly 82 million tons of limestone that slid down and on top of the small town of Frank, Alberta. Within roughly 100 seconds, the eastern edge of the mining town of Frank was crushed under an unstoppable tide of rock, killing and burying nearly 90 people, most of whom's body still remain trapped beneath the rubble to this day. 7 night shift miners who were still in the mines during the rock slide had become trapped due to large boulders that had covered the exits of the mine, as well as rising river waters. The 7 men were able to free themselves, but heartbreakingly, 2 of the men who went on to work at the Hillcrest mine died during the tragic explosion of 1914. Before the tragic disaster, Frank was a booming town built from coal and mining expansion. The Canadian Pacific Railway ran straight through the town and connected it to larger cities surrounded by wilderness. Families had begun to lay roots, and in the early mornings of April, all that changed. Before Frank was claimed by settlers and the mountain, the land belonged to the Blackfoot people, who named the mountain that moves. They warned settlers of the instability of the mountain, claiming that something lived within its rock. These warnings were passed down from generation to generation by Indigenous ancestors. Don't sleep beneath that mountain. It remembers. Unfortunately for the people of Frank, the warning of ancient mountains were not followed. Today, Frank Slide looks like a vast sea of boulders. If you visit at dusk, though, its energy changes. Hikers, tourists, park staff, and local residents of the area have all reported hearing phantom voices, screams, children crying, and mutters that seem to rise across the wind and then vanish. Some say they've heard footsteps that sound like small children following them as they hike. Others have reported mist that seems to appear and disappear within moments. And the most common sighting is lantern lights that dance across the base of the field where the old mining shaft might have been located. The most common ghost, however, is a woman in white that wanders the edge of the rock field. When approached, she disappears into the mist. Some believe she may be the ghost of Monty Lewis, a local prostitute who was murdered in Frank just weeks before the slide took place. Her lover, who murdered her over a gambling debt, confessed to the crime a week after an innocent man was hung. People have reported seeing her wandering along the trails, luring hikers to follow. If you have a chance to visit Frank, make sure that you visit the Frank Slide Interpretive Center. You'll find out all sorts of history about the location, the geology, and get to hear survivor stories, and something unspoken that might linger in the air there. Even staff have noted that the strange quiet settles over the place after hours. And if the mountain is waiting to speak again, it might just do so soon. In Indigenous teachings, it's believed that the land does hold memory. Tragedy doesn't just leave scars, it echoes through time. And the spirits of the lost hold unresolved grief and unanswered questions that lingers deep within the ground itself. Frank Slide is more than just a disaster site. It's a mass grave, a tragedy that speaks volumes on how we need to respect the land that we settle, and that it's more awake than we understand. There's a place up in north coast of British Columbia, nestled between the mountains and the sea. It doesn't appear on maps, and you wouldn't find signs pointing to it. There's no road, no dock, and no welcome center. But if you take a boat from the inland, along the observatory inlet, through the mist and the rain, and the forest shadows that have creeped in, you might stumble across it, or what's left of it. Founded in 1912 by Grimsby Consolidated Mining Company, it was a self-contained marvel of industrial planning in the middle of nowhere. It had everything: schools, hospitals, a dam, even an opera house. It ran almost entirely out of hydroelectricity power. At the height of industry, it housed nearly 3,000 people. For over 2 decades, the smelter poured smoke into the sky, but by 1935, the copper boom ended, and the smelter shut down. The workers left, and then came the fires. 2 massive blazes in the 1940s consumed most of what remained of the town. Wooden structures vanished, the forest reclaimed itself, and today, what's left of the town feels almost fossilized. Urban explorers who have made the journey by boat or seaplane describe the town as eerily intact, as if it's waiting for its inhabitants to come home. One explorer wrote, "I stepped onto the old powerhouse and immediately felt like I wasn't alone. I didn't hear anything at first, but then I noticed a light flickering at the far wall. The air was dead still. There was no power source, no wind, just a dim pulse of light, and the feeling that someone had just walked past me." Multiple visitors described the sensation of being watched, not in an aggressive way, but with a quiet intensity, like the town itself is curious why strangers are here. The most common reported paranormal hotspot in Anyox is what remains of the Catholic Church. Burned in one of the 1940 fires, its charred walls are still partially standing, and yet visitors say they can smell smoke when they stand inside, and a faint wood smoke mingled with incense. Some have claimed to see a figure of a priest in robes at the back of the sanctuary, motionlessly praying. And when approached, he disappears like shadow. In one legend, it's claimed that during the first fire, the priest refused to leave the church, insisting that God would protect him and his home. His body had never been found. Of course, what ghost town isn't complete without a cemetery? Located in the deep backwoods beyond the town's industrial ruins is a small secluded plot where many of the town's miners, workers, and residents were buried between the early 1900s and when the town became empty in the 1930s. The cemetery includes both marked and unmarked graves, some belonging to soldiers, others to young children lost to illness, or miners to mining accidents. Visitors describe the sensation of being watched here. Others report hearing faint voices, not cries or wails, but intimate conversations, like a gathering that continues long after it should have ended. There's also been reports of visitors standing near the center of the cemetery and saying they feel almost a chill, not a breeze necessarily, but something that seems to wrap around them until they step out, and then everything goes back. But the most frequent entity is the woman in black. It's a familiar folklore that we see often in many cemeteries and in many areas where deep mourning has taken place. She wears a long black dress, she drifts through forgotten worlds, and she generally is associated with a symbol of grief or a keeper of burial. She's seen predominantly in British ghost stories, Appalachian legends, and European wartime tales. And here in Anyox, she's unnamed, unconfirmed, but frequently seen. Explorers have reported a solitary shape among the ruins, not startling or aggressive, just ever present. Usually she's seen, again, near the charred frame of the church, most often at dusk, and when the fog begins to creep back through the forest. One visitor has described seeing her as, "It was a figure, definitely feminine, I think, standing in the far back corner of the church. I thought it was another person there at first, but then she didn't move, and when I stepped forward, she just wasn't there anymore." Another hiker walking past the graveyard suddenly felt cold. He turned to see what he swore was a silhouette of a woman standing at the tree line, a long dress, still as stone, and then she was gone. It's easy to write off these as tricks of the light, and of course, our mind tends to build imagination in places that are eerily quiet. The Anyox offers plenty of space for the imagination, and our mind seems to just fill in the blanks. But when a place is already heavy with loss and abandonment and flame, stories sometimes can be a mixture of reality and a bit of folklore. Our final location is just outside of Banff, tucked beneath the towering slopes of Cascade Mountain, and it's the broken bones of a town that was never meant to disappear. In the early 1900s, the little mining town of Blackhead buzzed with life. It was built by the Canadian Pacific Railway, and it was a rare thing to find organized and lit electricity in the thriving shadows of the wilderness. Coal was its lifeblood. And at the peak, over 1,000 people lived there. Families, children, workers, all tied to the rhythm of the mine. But things took a dark turn in the 1920s. The mine had shut down, and in a few short years, the homes were moved, the buildings were dismantled, and Blackhead faded fast. But it didn't vanish completely. Unlike the previous two ghost towns, this one was more tourist-friendly. But just because there are well-marked signs of a town that used to stand proud, or trails organized for visitors to walk around, it doesn't mean that there's nothing paranormal happening. Visitors often report localized cold spots, persistent feelings of being watched. Some say they've heard the sharp rhythmic clangs of pickaxes deep beneath the earth. Others hear shuffling of boots on gravel, as if miners were still clocking in for a shift that ended a century ago. Many visitors have claimed to see a man in old-fashioned gear with a lamp helmet. His face is smudged with coal, and as he moves, he seems to almost vanish into one of the ruined buildings. There's a lore that's passed down through generations. Never let someone you love be the first to be buried in a cemetery. This isn't a localized lore either. It persists well beyond the borders of Canada. It's believed that a curse follows the family of the first person who's buried in a cemetery, and that death will follow that family for generations to come. So for the new town of Bankhead, it's not surprising that when it came to face its first burial, there was an expected hesitation. No one wanted to be first. So the town did something which many believe was the beginning of its end. The man who died wasn't a local, in the ways that the others were, at least. He was a Chinese laboring immigrant named Yi Chang. He worked in the mines to send money home to his family. In 1921, while gathering herbs on the slope of Cascade Mountain, he was caught in a sudden snowdrift. He didn't survive the fall, and there was no family to claim him. So the town did what the town wanted, and they buried him. Over the years, there has been speculation that his death may not have been an accident, but more an intentional way to skip a generational curse and to appease superstition among the community. Yi Chao had no local ties, and the curse would have no local roots to grow within the community. The story doesn't really end there. You see, not long after, his remains were exhumed and returned to China to the family that was waiting for him. It's believed that alone awoke a curse that ended the legacy of Backhead. Not long after, the town collapsed and the mining industry shut down. The cemetery itself, for what remains of it, is almost completely empty. There is one grave of a dog, but visitors who walk the area say it's unnervingly quiet. People say it has a heavy feel, and it almost feels restricting in a way. The most haunted area of Blackhead, though, isn't the cemetery. It's the old wash house, where miners would clean themselves off from a day of grime and work before returning home to their families. It's mostly just foundation now, but people who've walked it have reported shadows that move without light, brief flashes of warmth, like someone just walked past them, and some visitors swear they hear the voices of men laughing and having full conversations, or humming and whistling faint songs. It's always distant, but it always feels like something is still trapped in time there. Bankhead doesn't feel forgotten at all. It feels as though it's just been paused, that the people beneath it are waiting for someone to dig deep enough to let them out, or listen closely to hear them again. So if you find yourself walking the trail that's just outside of Banff, and a breeze goes still, or you hear something like a breath or a whisper or the sound of a pickaxe, maybe don't look back, because you never know what might be standing behind you. Thank you for joining me on this Western Canada journey through some of the most haunted ghost towns around. Next week, we're going to be exploring a haunted hotel that needs no introduction, the Fairmount Banff Spring Hotel. If you have stayed here, or you know somebody who stayed here, and you have a creepy experience, I want to hear it. Please send us an email at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com and put in the description Banff Springs Hotel so that we know your creepy story doesn't get lost in the mail. Until next time, if you hear voices in the woods or you walk through an old, abandoned town, maybe don't ask for directions. You never know who you might be talking to. And as always, stay safe, stay curious, and stay spooky. This episode was written and produced by me, Shauna. If you have your own eerie tale or hometown haunting or episode request, please email us at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Let's Talk Spooky on Instagram or Let's Talk Spooky Pod on TikTok. See you next time.